Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Steering Change. Today, we are discussing the value of AMTA's involvement with key industry organizations and how these relationships help strengthen our advocacy efforts, improve industry engagement, and ensure that the voice of our members is heard where it matters most. Today, we're joined by AMTA's Andy Barnes, Senior Advisor, Government Relations and Compliance, and we'll focus on our involvement primarily with the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators, or CCMTA, the Private Motor Truck Council, or PMTC, and the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, or CVSA. Andy will shed light on how participation in these groups creates opportunities to influence policy, build industry credibility, and support the broader transportation community. No single organization can address every challenge facing the transportation sector alone. Regulatory changes, safety initiatives, technology adoption, labor shortages, and infrastructure issues all require coordinated efforts among industry stakeholders. Our participation in industry associations and regulatory forums give us access to important discussions, emerging trends, and decision makers. It also allows us to bring the concerns and priorities of our members directly into those conversations. To that end, let's dig deeper. Andy, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Kelsey.
Anytime, my friend. So first, let's start with a bit about yourself and the work that you do with AMTA.
Sounds good. Well, a little bit about myself. I've spent 18 and a half years roughly with commercial vehicle enforcement, doing everything from on-road stuff to investigations. And then interestingly enough, I moved into private industry and worked at Shell Tervita, where I did fleet safety and was overseeing not only national safety code compliance, but down in the U.S. compliance with the U.S. DOT regulations, and then helped to develop some global programs too. From there, I came over to the AMTA, where I have been for about 10 and a half years, which I thought would be the easy walk in the park. But it wasn't, because riding that line between government and our industry's needs isn't that easy, and understanding the challenges that the industry faces and putting it together and then working with government to work through these sometimes takes a lot of time. And these points of advocacy are usually to improve safety on the highways, but even then, everything moves slowly. So it's a matter of keeping good notes, tracking stuff, and really staying on top of the regulatory world when it comes to transportation.
Absolutely. And I think we'll shed some more light on that balance with government and ourselves as an association today. I started off with all our acronyms in the intro. We're going to be talking about member value and what kind of some of our partners do. So Andy, let's start with CCMTA. In what capacity do yourself and AMTA work with them, and how do we work together to impact industry?
Well, CCMTA is a super important group, the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators. And basically what that is, it's where all of the provinces gather to set national standards on how the provinces develop regulations to adhere to the national standards. Because we're a federated country, we have multiple regulations across all the provinces, and every carrier profile is different. So sitting at that table and really, helping to influence and affect the things that matter to the industry are incredibly important. So let's think about all of the standards. And when we get to some of the more critical ones, 7, 14, and 15, we've seen a massive amount of work being done lately. So CCMTA not only covers regulatory work, but road safety issues, as well as driver's licensing issues, medical issues around licensing. But really what we were focusing in on for the last few years there, where it was, how do we improve that whole regulatory framework moving across the country when it comes to the National Safety Code? And how do we get that interprovincial record exchange to work better? So right now, because everybody across Canada has got a carrier profile in a different province, things happen. Companies get in trouble in one province, and then they can slide over to another province and pop up as a chameleon carrier, or and things like that. And the work that was being done by the provincial administrators, meaning all of the provinces send their executive directors or director, whatever the case may be, and they put a lot of thought and work into this. And really 7, 14, and 15 is improving the interprovincial record exchange. So if you receive a ticket in, let's say, Manitoba or collision, whatever the case may be, that shows up also on your carrier profile where you're based out of, which is critical, or else we don't get this well-rounded picture of how a carrier is performing. And previous, that's where carriers slipped through that thing when we talked about chameleon carriers. So working with the provinces nationally on how those standards are developed and how all the provincial regulations meet those federal standards is really critical. And the work that they've done has been moving quick. And I think it's moving us forward, Kelsey, in the right manner now. So good work. Hats off to all the provinces administrators that have been at the conference and the good work that the provinces have done.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And for our listeners on the subject of chameleon carriers and Driver Inc., we will make sure to put in the show notes a link to some resources where you can learn more about those. So we've covered off CCMTA. Andy, tell me about PMTC.
PMTC was an interesting one, and this is the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada. And interestingly enough, they're not part of CT, but they represent the Walmarts of the world, Home Depots and stuff like that. So I did a paper up and submitted it, and it was accepted to talk about Beyond the Compliance, their conference. And when I attended their conference, I found it to be really an excellent conference. They're very much aligned on worker misclassification, driver incorporated, like you talked about, Kelsey, facility audit consistency, training oversights across Canada for federally regulated carriers. And just being part of that when we start lobbying for the same things, working with other different associations and making sure that we understand the problems and or we're aligned with them or they are aligned with us, maybe not in all cases, but in most cases is super critical when we want to move stuff forward. Again, with our federated country, we're dealing with all of the provinces and territories, right? So when we speak nationally and you hear about the same subject matter, not only from the AMTA, but the CTA, the other provincial associations, plus PMTC, it really does make for meaningful change.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, probably the most well-known of the three, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, or CVSA. Tell us about them.
So CVSA is the big one, and this is one of the most critical conferences I think provincial associations can attend. Right now, we don't see a lot of provincial associations there, which is really too bad, because CVSA is critical because that's where enforcement regulators and industry work on inspection consistency, the out of service criteria, enforcement initiatives, and North American commercial vehicle standards, okay? Working with the CVSA is super critical. Having a vote on there is really important because we're ensuring that the Canadian concerns are being brought forward correctly and that our carriers' concerns are being listened to. So I'll give you a couple examples. One would be policy and regulatory. And this is one of the committees where I have voting rights on. And right now, the US DOT are going through a process where they're redeveloping their application process to obtain a DOT number. So what I did is I sat on that ad hoc committee, and really what we're doing is helping them understand what carriers need and how carriers need to be evaluated before they get on the road. So the process was you apply online, you got a US DOT number, and then you would get basically a phone audit, which wasn't that effective. They're really adopting a lot of the Alberta principles, which are, okay, we need education before you go in there. You got to prove that you know how to operate as a carrier by an exam. Next step is make your application, submit your safety and maintenance plan, And one of the most critical things, which I understand might be changing in Alberta too, is ensuring that carriers can't register vehicles prior to obtaining that USDOT number. And that's a change that we're seeing in Canada too, because again, where there's loopholes, some of these carriers are less than reputable, find them, and that's where they move either from province to province, or if they were in the US, they change a US DOT number and such, but they keep popping up. So we've got policy and regulatory. Another important one is emerging technologies, and this is becoming even more critical. I can tell you from the 2026 conference down in Chicago, this was a time where technology was first and foremost, whether it's level 8 inspections, identifying who's coming upon a vehicle inspection site or a roadside check, identifying them using geofencing and technologies, understanding whether their registration and things are good, and then screening them for hours of service is super critical. Because if we can pull this program together and bring it up to Canada, and maybe we're even going to beat the US because our systems are so big, the whole goal would be, again, let's sort the carriers when they're going into these inspection stations, and let's keep the carriers that are performing out of them, and the carriers that are not performing or don't have a good safety rating, get them in there and get them inspected and allow enforcement to really target what they're doing. And the other thought is too, when we talk about level 8 inspections, is, you know what, while we're doing all of these things and while we're electronically recording all this information from carriers, if a carrier does pass it, a level 8 inspection, there's no defects with hours of service, driver's licensing, or anything with the vehicle, carrier profile, maybe they should get a positive credit, Kelsey, because we've got carriers out on the road. We know that inspections are down across the country, and we know that the different enforcement agencies are being tasked with other duties that are more policing in manner, and that we're not seeing the numbers that we can't. And by increasing the volume of inspections, that gets better data back to Alberta Transportation and all of the provinces to understand what they need to focus in on and really ensure that these unscrupulous carriers are taken off the road. The other, I think, we could go through all the committees that I sit on. I think my favorite committee, honestly, is the International Driver Excellence Award. We made a submission for that this year. I
Great
believe
program
our
with
driver
CVSA.
came in, came in second this year. And this is where CVSA really celebrates the driver, which is super important. And the critical work they do on Alberta or on any highways across North America. You have to have 25 years crash-free history, no convictions in the last 3 years, and a bunch of other requirements to be able to submit a name to this. So celebrating that driver is super important. A $5,000 check and a lunch is held in their honor. So really happy to sit on that committee, Kelsey. Besides all the regulatory work, we have to take care of the industry and make sure that we're promoting drivers and helping and really improving things too.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Andy, through all these organizations we've been chatting about, we would remiss not to discuss AMTA's work with Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors, or TEC. Can you tell me a bit more about our relationship?
I think the relationship with Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors and the Monitoring Compliance Branch, or Traffic Safety Services, has been better in the last couple of years than we've ever seen. And it's just a whole lot of fun working with them. Everything from evolving and affecting different legislation to changing programs out there. For example, right now we're talking driver experience letter and how that might benefit carriers, right? And I know a lot of you ladies are aware of this, but really, does it benefit the big carriers or is it only beneficial to the small carriers? So these are the challenges that we have to bring to Alberta Transportation and bring forward to them so that they understand what's happening and how we can make things better for them, Kelsey. It's the executive directors, whether it's monitoring compliance or the safety fitness area, or whether it's permitting and things like that, keeping those connections strong, building those relationships is super critical for the industry, because when we find ourselves or a carrier in a bit of a tight spot, we need to get some answers, or we need an interpretation on regulation. Having close allies and the minister is super critical. And it's really important too, because not only does Alberta Transportation provide us with those answers and we work on them with initiatives, but they also have a seat at those national tables, like I was talking about, whether it's CVSA, whether it's CCMTA. I've even seen some of the provinces at PMTC and different things like this. It's really a small world out there when you talk about the transportation industry. Go to these things, understanding the people, working with them, and being able to explain the problems from your particular part of the country is super critical. And having Alberta Transportation standing behind our back as an association is hugely beneficial. So yeah, it's been great lately. Enjoy working with everyone there, and we're moving a lot of things forward.
Awesome. Thank you. And I mean, with the groups that we've mentioned, CCMTA, PMTC, CVSA, and Tech, there are others that we're working with as well. But how, when you come together with these different groups, can that help to effectively address industry challenges?
Well, I think first off, it allows us to see the regulatory enforcement and policy trends that are coming. We can inform our members on what's happening and stuff. Secondly is credibility. People think that it's a lot of fun going to these conferences. I can tell you it's not as fun as what people think when you're attending all of these different things. But developing that level of credibility, putting forward suggestions and ideas at these conferences, and being able to really take the problems to industry forward is super, super important. The Alberta Motor Transport Association, I can tell you, has got a credible voice when we talk, whether it's Transport Canada, Ibrahim Assaw, the Executive Director of Transport Canada's Road Safety, whether it's Linda from CCMTA, who is a president of that organization and pulls all the provinces together, Mike over at PMTC, or moving into CVSAs with the particular committee, industry and enforcement chairs, as well as understanding who to talk to at CVSA when we've got problems. So for example, Colin Mooney, the executive director of CVSA, we've got a great relationship with Colin. And you know what, when there's a concerning factor for the industry or we've got a problem, that's super important that we're able to reach out. We can talk to Mike at PMTC or whatever the case may be, because really that voice and that sense of credibility across all of these different areas is how we bring a lot of the value to industry members. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of talking that up. And I think that's something that we need to work on is, everything we do really is there to value the carriers, Kelsey.
Absolutely. And hold that thought, because I'm going to bug you with a question on that in just a minute. But first, I imagine that you have touched on some of these, but what are 3 hot topics in the advocacy realm which are currently affecting industry?
Well, I think the first hot topic would be carrier identity, whether we're talking about driver incorporated chameleon carriers. Canada needs to be better tools to see who's actually behind the carrier, directors, addresses, related companies, safety history, and whether a carrier is simply reappearing under another name, right? So that's got to be the hottest topic out there. Secondly is driver competency and training. And in fact, after CCMTA, I attended the PTAC meeting, that deals with training across Canada. And driver competency and training quality is one of the most important things out there right now. Because if we don't get the right people into those drivers' seats. And if we don't train them, and if we don't ensure that we're developing competency-based programs moving forward, we're never going to save those problems, right? So whether we think of it as an apprenticeship program, and some people don't like that, or whether it's a simple mentorship program, we need that additional support on how to get people trained so that we avoid terrible collisions like we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the tough one out there. I think the third hot topic, and I'd almost debate whether this needs to move up to the top one, is technology and enforcement modernization. Because that alone can change how carriers are regulated and how we look at these topics, whether it's ELD tampering, data quality, level 8 inspections, AI and camera systems so that you can have an inward-facing camera looking at drivers using facial recognition features and determining whether a driver's wearing a seatbelt without actually videoing them, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of side with these drivers. If you're being videoed, how comfortable are you really are? Is that camera really off when you're, let's say, crawling into the bunker, whatever the case may be? So understanding that technology, using advancements when it comes to roadside enforcement, like we talked about the level 8 inspection, all of those things are developed to combat, driver incorporated. And then when we talk about competency and training too, I think when we move down that path, we need to be we need to ensure that we've got a really strong program going forward that uses ELBs, maybe it uses inward-facing cameras, so that we know the drivers are behind the seats and the people are fulfilling all of the hours that are required, not only just entry-level training, standard 16 of the National Safety Code, or MELT, like we call it in Alberta, but that the driver is actually competent. And I think that's the key here, is ensuring that we start training drivers to a level of competency, that their competency is assessed, and that it's recorded. And if someone is deeming someone competent and a collision happens, well, maybe we need to go back and we need to look at that training. Maybe we need to look at that competency assessor to ensure that it was done correctly. So, you know what? All of these are hot topics, Kelsey, and they all kind of blend together when we look at it from a technology piece.
So when we are talking about these different pieces, compliance, technology, AMTA's advocacy efforts, it's all kind of balled up into what was known as AMTA's Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Committee, where carriers have a seat at the table to lend their voice to our advocacy efforts. A bit of a segue here, but on June 23rd, our Compliance and Regulatory Affairs meeting, we announced that we are changing the name to the Government Relations and Compliance Group Committee Department. Can you just shed some light on the change and reasoning behind that?
Well, I think it's just refocusing on the committee on where you're most effective and how we can change things for the betterment of the industry. Compliance and advocacy are connected, as you well know. They're super important that we get our points over to government. But government relations are the key to it all, because without developing those relationships, sitting on those committees, working with them, working with whether it's CCMTA, Alberta Transportation, and things like that, without that government relations piece and developing those relationships, you're not going to make steps ahead, right? It's just human nature. If I'm respectful to someone in government and they understand that we're only doing the best for the industry, we're more likely to be a lot more successful with our advocacy, right? So I think government relations and compliance is a name that's most fitting. And we're also looking at better ways of communicating too with all of our carrier members going forward. So it's an exciting time to be part of the GRC committee, Compliance, Regulatory, and Compliance, or as I fondly like to call it, GERC, going forward.
We love the GERC nickname, but that ties in perfectly to my next question. You had touched on member value earlier. With all that we've discussed today and with GERC coming in as the new committee, can you expand on the value of becoming a full carrier member with AMTA?
Well, Kelsey, full carrier members get the broader AMTA value, whether it's advocacy, education, safety resources, training opportunities. One of the key ones, again, I always go back to is networking, committee access, policy upgrades, and a stronger collective voice, right? So GRC involvement gives members focused place to raise regulatory and compliance issues, hear what's coming up front, but also allowing us at the AMTA to understand industry's challenges so that we can properly represent the industry when it comes to advocating for people. If we don't understand and listen to everyone, whether it's a one carrier member or a carrier with 1,000 trucks, we're not going to be able to move ahead. So I think focusing in on this, bringing people together is super critical. And I think this whole piece of relationships and building those with government, as well as our members, are only going to strengthen the AMTA.
Awesome. Thank you. And I mean, we might have touched on this with the hot topics, but let's pull out that crystal ball. What do you see for industry coming up in 2027?
I think we need to watch NSC Standard 14 and 7, 14, and 15, the modernization of carrier profiles, safety ratings, safety fitness certificate controls, facility audits, corporate linkage to carriers, and audit scope 2. One of the key things that I've mentioned too is watching the carrier data exchange. We need to see this information exchanged across the country in a timely manner. As I say this, I know there's a few members saying, well, then how come sometimes we get dumps of information from other provinces? And those are the sort of things we need to be cleared up, right? If a carrier gets information that a driver received a violation or an out of service ticket on their carrier profile, they need to be able to really change that behavior right away, deal with it before anything triggers the government into an audit, because nobody wants to be in that situation. So that's an important matter. I think we need to watch over driver incorporated chameleon carrier enforcement as we talk about these different technologies and how we're aligning 7, 14, and 15. I think we're going to be able to address the issue of not only improving safety, labor issues, tax and insurance, but fair competition across the country too. Because you know what? When you're trying to deal with a carrier that's got a 30% competitive advantage on you because they're not following the rules, it's not conducive to a good industry. So I think another important one is training and competency. We've talked about the different technologies that are coming. But I think it's time to throw in this whole beyond the compliance thing too. And this is a concept that we have a policy position at the AMTA. And with the Montgomery decision out of the US, which was where C.H. Robinson was basically sued for picking a carrier, not vetting them correctly, and that carrier was involved in a fatality collision. The U.S. Supreme Court, it made its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Montgomery challenged the decision where typically brokers were not held accountable. So the U.S. Supreme Court decided that no, brokers got to start screening carriers. They have to make sure that the carriers are vetted for safety and that we can move forward properly. And I think this is only going to improve the industry. When you think about technology like we've talked about and safety management programs, and we combine those two and develop really strong in-house safety management programs and how we manage data from ELDs and stuff, and we coach drivers, we're really affecting the whole culture of the company. And by affecting the culture of the company, we're driving that continuous improvement, which is critical. And once you've got that in place, the other challenge is, hey, we're talking about mentorship and things. And if we get mentorship in place, and we've got a good mentorship program in place, and we've got all these additional controls, companies are using defensible technologies, and the result of those technologies to coach drivers, we see collisions, violations drop. We ensure that carriers are doing the right thing out on the road. I think we can set that level of excellence, if you would, a lot higher. Right now, when we think about a level of excellence. We think about the ACES program, the former PIC program. And I think that whole level of excellence needs to be stepped up one. It needs to involve, like I talked about, technology, safety management programs, and changing the culture of that company. When you're riding there and you're really taking care of business and whether it's in the US, your CSA scores, or in Canada, your carrier profile, you're exceeding everything, companies need some piece of recognition. And maybe this Beyond the Compliance program becomes that pre-qualification program for carriers, which would really make that big difference. When shippers have a way to vet carriers, I think we can only move this industry forward in a positive manner, and the unscrupulous carriers, again, are not able to get work.
Awesome. Andy, I am always blindsided by your knowledge on all of this, particularly compliance. You are a huge and valuable resource for AMTA. So thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to ask, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I think I'd just like to encourage everybody, if you're a carrier member, watch for when we're having meetings. They're super important. This is your opportunity to chat with the government, chat with various speakers that we have, or just let's talk about the challenges that we have in the industry and how the AMTA can help you out, Kelsey.
Awesome. Great plug. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Kelsey. Have a good day.
Let's close with some news. I want you to bust out those calendars for some save the dates. The first one is October 15th. That is our 2026 Drawdown dinner that takes place at the River Cree Event Center. That second date is April 7th and 8th, 2027. That is AMTA's 89th annual conference, and that also takes place at the River Cree. And then lastly, October 1st is our White Court Safety Summit. Make sure if you are our friends in the north that you are signing up for that one. We have a really great lineup prepared. Do you have any questions or comments about the Steering Change episodes? Please do reach out on our Instagram at AMTA_CA or LinkedIn and Facebook at Alberta Motor Transport Association. Stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Did you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.